Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to study about big data analytics tools and technology. So what tools we are going to use in big data for analytics of the data, so that we are going to study today. So here big data analytics can consist of many different software pieces that collect, store, manipulate and analyze all different data types. So these tools will collect the data, store the data, manipulate and analyze the different types of data which are gathered from the different devices. Generally, the industry looks to the 5 V's to categorize big data. Actually, initially it was 3 V's. It was only velocity, volume and variety. But now it is increased as the amount of data processed is increased, as the technology is evaluating. The V's are also increased. Now it has become 5 V's. Those 5 V's are velocity, variety, volume, value and veracity. So what are they? Velocity refers to how quickly the data is being collected and analyzed. It depends on talks about the speed of the processing or analyzing of the data. Variety, it refers to the different types of data, the varieties of data. Volume refers to the scale of the data, the amount. Then the value refers to the ability to transform huge data into business. Then veracity means it refers to source reliability, information credibility and content validity. So here I have given you a diagram to demonstrate the same. So let us see what are these different 5 V's. So velocity, batch, real, so that means the speed, how fast the data processes in batches or in real time or as processes or as streams it is going to process. Then the volume. So volume means how much amount of data in terms of terabytes, records, transactions or tables or files. Then variety. So here variety means the different types of data, whether it is a structured data, semi-structured data, unstructured data or probabilistic data. Then value. So value, as we discussed here, it refers to ability to transform huge data into business. So how the huge data is transformed into business. So like statistical data, events, correlations, hypothetical data. So these are different values. Then veracity. Veracity means the credibility or the authenticity of the data. So veracity means trustworthiness, this one. Trustworthiness, authenticity, origin, reputation, availability and accountability. Veracity talks about all these things. So these are the different 5 V's which comes in big data analytics. Next we are talking about the sources of the big data. So sources can be the machine data, transaction data, social data, enterprise data. So these are the different sources of the data. So machine data is generated by the IoT devices and it is usually unstructured. We have seen this before. The IoT devices, which are nothing but the smart objects which generate the data in real time, and they are unstructured data. Then transactional data have high volume and structured. So transactional data like bank transactions, online transactions, etc. have high volume and they are usually structured data. And social data sources, social media, high volume and they are usually structured. And enterprise data, so enterprise data is low in volume and it is very much structured, used for enterprise purposes. The data ingest is the layer that connects data sources to storage. So all these data sources can be connected through the data ingest. It pre-processes, validates, extracts, and stores the data temporarily for further processing. The new database technologies that have strengths and potential drawbacks when used in IoT context. So like big data analytic tools are having both strengths, are having very much strength and capability to manipulate and analyze and store the big data. But the big data which is generated by IoT devices to work with IoT context, these have a few drawbacks. So the three most popular of these tools are massively parallel processing systems, NoSQL, and Hadoop. So these are the three most popular categories of tools of big data which can be used in IoT context. So let us see them one by one. Okay, let us look into massively parallel processing databases. In short, they are called as MPP. So enterprises have used relational databases, that is in the tabular form, for storing the data for decades, right? Enterprises were using tabular form of databases for storing from a long time. Relational databases are grouped into data warehouses. When that data, enterprise data, increased in volume, the data warehouses were used to store the data. And these data warehouses are the centerpiece of most of the data architectures. Even this MPP databases were built on the concept of relational data warehouses only. It is designed to be much faster, efficient, and to support reduced query times. To accomplish this, MPP databases take advantage of multiple nodes, that means computers, designed in scale-out architecture. So, to accomplish all these faster, efficient, and reduced query times, the MPP database take the advantage of different multiple computers which are designed in scale-out architecture. What is the scale-out architecture? It is the new hardware. So it is a architecture where you can add new hardware and you can configure according to your necessity. So that is scale-out architecture. So whenever you require more number of computers to be added, you can add them and you can configure them whenever there is a need. That is scale-out architecture. Both data and processing are distributed across multiple systems. So data and the processing are distributed in different systems. When it is distributed, the load on a single system will be reduced and faster execution will be there. So these databases types process massive data sets in parallel because there are multiple processors, multiple nodes. So parallelly the processing happens across many processors and nodes. An MPP architecture contains a single master node which is responsible for coordination of and management of all these nodes. There will be a single master node which is responsible for looking after and coordination of all the different nodes where the data is distributed for processing. It also operates in a shared nothing fashion. So what is the shared nothing fashion? Shared nothing fashion is also called as loosely coupled fashion, with each node containing local processing, memory, IO and OS. That means, as I said, there will be multiple processors. Each processor will share nothing. That means they will have their own processor, they'll have their own memory, they'll have their own IO devices, and they will have their own OS. Nothing, no resources will be shared by the main server. As we said, there will be a single master. So it is only for coordination. It will not share the resources. So it works in shared nothing fashion. All the processors will have their own processors, memory, IO devices and the operating system. They are not going to share anything from any resource from other nodes. The data storage is optimized across the nodes in a structured SQL-like format. So it uses the structured SQL-like format. This allows data analysts to use common SQL tools and applications for processing the data. Hence, it will allow the users to use common SQL tools for processing this data. As a data stored on massive parallel processing systems must conform to this relational structure, it may not be only database type used in the IoT implementation, right? Because as we have seen, traditional RDBMS which uses SQL will not suit the IoT context, which we have studied in earlier classes, which will not suit the IoT context. So MPP is based on SQL, so it may not be a only choice for IoT implementation. In contrast to massive multiprocessing systems, we have symmetric multiprocessing systems. It is only for your information. So symmetric multiprocessing information means there will be multiple CPUs. As you can see, there are multiple processors. All processors will have common memory and common IO. It is shared. Okay, so main memory is shared and IO is shared. So all processors will share the memory and the IO devices. So there are multiple processors, parallelly they will be processing, but they will not have their own memory and their own IO devices. Rather, they will share the main memory and the IO devices from the other system. It is in contrast with MPP. So then MPP shared nothing architecture is like this. As I told, there will be multiple nodes. You can see there is node 1, node 2 and till node n, any number of nodes. As it is also a scale out architecture, you can go on adding the nodes according to your requirement, and there is a master host which will look after the coordination of all these nodes, and there is a standby master in case if this master host failure, then standby master will take the charge. And there are multiple nodes, node 1, node 2 till node n, and each node, as you can see, they have their own storage, they have their own processor, they have their own IO devices. So this is MPP scale out architecture. After MPP, NoSQL databases are another type of tools which are supported by big data to handle IoT context. So this NoSQL stands for Not Only SQL, is a class of databases that support semi-structured, unstructured and structured data. So all types of data you can handle by data warehouses and massive parallel processing systems. NoSQL is not a specific database technology. Rather, it is an umbrella term that encompasses several different types of databases, which include document stores. So what is this document stores? This is the type of database which stores semi-structured data, for example, XML and JSON. What is the semi-structured data? Semi-structured data means it contains some semantic tags. It does not conform to a data model but has some structure. It is not a fixed schema. It doesn't have a fixed or a rigid schema. It is also portable. So the examples are like JSON, XML, .csv files, tab limited files, etc. So these are semi-structured data. Document stores generally have query engines and indexing features. So they have query engines and indexing features which will allow many optimized queries. When we have these features, so our queries are optimized. Next, the key value stores. So this key value store stores the associative arrays where a key is paired with an associated value. It is a key, it is a value and a key pair. It is easy to scale. Then wide column stores. This is another type of NoSQL where it stores similar to key value store, but the formatting of the values can vary from row to row even in the same table. Then the graph stores. So graph stores are organized based on relationships between the elements. Commonly in the social media, so like relationships like friends to friends, and the community belong to a particular person, the albums belong to particular person, friends belong to particular person, friends of friends, like relations will be there, no, relationship will be there. So such kind of data will be stored by graph stores. And also natural language processing, which is also the data of relationships, where the connections between data are very relevant. Social media data and natural processing data are stored with graph stores. Next is the Hadoop. Hadoop is the most recent entrant into the data management market. It is a kind of NoSQL. Most popular choice. This is the most popular choice as a data repository and processing engine. It is used for both storage and processing. Hadoop was developed initially by a project at Google and also Yahoo, and the original intent of Hadoop was index millions of websites and quickly return search results. So it was designed, Hadoop was designed for indexing originally, and it is open source search and it will search results for open source search engines. Initially the project had two key elements, one is HDFS and the other one is MapReduce. HDFS is Hadoop Distributed File System. Hadoop Distributed File System is a system for storing data across multiple nodes in a name node and data node architecture. We'll see what is this name node and data node architecture. And MapReduce is a distributed processing engine that splits large tasks into smaller ones that can be run in parallel. So let us see both of them. A MapReduce algorithm contains two important tasks, namely map and reduce. So MapReduce is not a single operation, it is a combination of two operations. One is map, the other one is reduce. So reduce task is always performed after the map task. Map takes a set of data and converts it into another set of data where individual elements are broken down into tuples, that is key value pairs. It will take some data and convert it into another set of data where it will be key value pairs. So what is reduce task? It takes the output from the map and as an input it combines those data tuples into smaller set of tuples. That operation you can see in the picture here. Input is given and the map reduce operation is applied and output will be obtained like this, the smaller set of tuples. So I have given here a link to demonstrate the map reduce operation. Let us watch the video.
This video uses a basic example to explain how MapReduce works. MapReduce is a two-phase paradigm for crunching large data sets in a distributed system. Suppose you want to make 3 sandwiches, an Italian, a turkey, and a ham sandwich. A list of the ingredients needed for each sandwich is gathered during the map phase, and the total amount for each ingredient is determined during the reduce phase. The database contains a JSON document for each sandwich that defines the ingredients for that sandwich. You want to build an index that omits the ingredient and its value for each document, and use sum for the reduce. Here you can see the documents in the database listing the ingredients for each sandwich. Next, you can query this index to see the amount of each individual ingredient for each sandwich. And then query the index to determine how much of each ingredient you need to make the 3 sandwiches. Visit the Cloudent Learning Center at ibm.biz/cloudent-learning.
Okay, that is how the MapReduce work. So here we are looking at the distributed Hadoop cluster where you can see the name node and the data nodes, which we have seen in the previous slide. So what is this name node? Name nodes are the critical piece of data which adds, moves, deletes and reads the data on the HDFS. So it performs some operations on the data like adding the data, moving from one location to another location, deleting and reading on the HDFS, and also they coordinate where the data is stored and maintain a map of where each block of data is stored and where it is replicated. So where the data is stored, whether the data is stored in rack 1, rack 2, rack 3 or any other rack, and how many times it is replicated, where and all, which location it is replicated, that also will be kept track by these name nodes. So replication of data is done for the backup. The name node takes write requests from the clients and distribute it through this distribution switch. It will distribute it to the different nodes, different racks here. Of the sizes, usually it will be of 64 MB or 128 MB blocks, and it is the name node is also responsible for instructing this data nodes where that replication should occur. So where that replication should occur, whether in this rack or any other rack, where exactly the data replication should occur will also be told by the name node to the data node. So this is the name node, and the data node are the servers which are where the data is stored and at the direction of the name node. So where the data is stored, that is the data node, and data will be stored by the directions of the name node. So it is common to have many data nodes in a Hadoop clusters to store the data. So we have many data nodes. Data blocks are distributed across several nodes. So here among these several nodes, data is distributed and also replicated in multiple locations. Usually 3 locations or 4 locations, or sometimes more than 4 also, across nodes for redundancy, for backup. So once the data is written to one of these data nodes, the data node selects 2 or more additional nodes based on replication policies. So when this distribution switch passes the data here, this name node will direct the data node to store in any of the racks. Suppose the data is stored in this rack, then data node will also check where it should be replicated, whether it should be replicated in rack 3 or nth rack or in rack 2. That will be decided by the data node to ensure the redundancy across the cluster. So these are the points which I discussed just now about the name nodes and data nodes. So here you can see writing a file to HDFS. So here the client writes the data to the name node space, namespace and block management. It will distribute the data to different racks, and you can see here the different data are in different colors, 1 in red, 2 in green, and third is in yellow. Then here one is stored here and it is replicated here and here in the rack 3 twice. Similarly, the data 3 is stored in rack 1 and it is replicated in rack 2 twice and once in rack 3. Similarly, the second data. So in order to summarize this concept, I have given you a link here. So let us watch the video.
In this session, let us try to understand how Hadoop works. The Hadoop framework comprises of the Hadoop distributed file system and the MapReduce framework. Let us try to understand how the data is managed and processed by the Hadoop framework. The Hadoop framework divides the data into smaller chunks and stores each part of the data on a separate node within the cluster. Let us say we have around 4 terabytes of data and a 4-node Hadoop cluster. The HDFS would divide this data into 4 parts of 1 terabyte each. By doing this, the time taken to store this data onto the disk is significantly reduced. The total time taken to store this entire data onto the disk is equal to storing one part of the data, as it will store all the parts of the data simultaneously on different machines. In order to provide high availability, what Hadoop does is it would replicate each part of the data onto other machines that are present within the cluster. The number of copies it will replicate depends on the replication factor. By default, the replication factor is set to 3. If we consider the default replication factor is set, then there will be 3 copies for each part of the data on 3 different machines. In order to reduce the bandwidth and latency time, it would store 2 copies of same part of the data on the nodes that are present within the same rack. And the last copy would be stored on a node that is present on a different rack. Let us say node 1 and node 2 are on rack 1 and node 3 and node 4 are on rack 2. Then the first 2 copies of part 1 will be stored on node 1 and node 2. And the third copy of part 1 will be stored either on node 3 or node 4. The similar process is followed for storing remaining parts of the data. Since this data is distributed across the cluster, the Hadoop distributed file system takes care of the networking required by these nodes in order to communicate. Another advantage of distributing this data across the cluster is that while processing this data, it reduces a lot of time, as this data can be processed simultaneously. This was a brief overview of how Hadoop works. We would be learning how the data is written or read from the Hadoop cluster in the later sessions.
The next tool is yet another resource negotiator. In short, it is YARN. It is designed to enhance the functionalities of the MapReduce. With the initial release of MapReduce, it was responsible for batch processing and job tracking and also resource management. So the burden on MapReduce was more. So Yarn came into picture. Yarn was developed to take up the resource negotiation. So burden on the MapReduce is little reduced. And also job tracking, allowing MapReduce to be responsible only for the data processing. So now the data processing is only the job of the MapReduce. Resource negotiation, management and job tracking is taken over by the Yarn. Yarn is responsible for allocating system resources to the various applications running in a Hadoop cluster. Then it also is responsible for scheduling the tasks which are to be executed on different cluster nodes. It is one of the key features added in Hadoop 2.0 version. So this is how the Yarn architecture looks like. So here you can see the clients where the resource manager will manage the resources, each one of them. Each of the nodes will be having a node manager, a container and an application master. So let us see what are the jobs or the tasks of these different components here in Yarn architecture. The global resource manager accepts job submissions from users, schedules jobs and allocates resources to them. So that is the work of resource manager. So we saw here in this architecture the resource manager, which is responsible for accepting jobs which are submitted by the user, scheduling them and allocating the resources for them. So these are all the jobs of the resource manager. Then node manager takes the instructions from resource manager and manages the resources available on a single node. So here you have seen the node manager also, right? So this is the node manager which is present in different nodes. So this node manager is it will take the instructions from the resource manager and manages the resources which are present on each node. An application master, which was along with node manager in the architecture, is created for each application to negotiate for resources. So which resources it require, it will ask and it will accept. And work with node manager to execute and monitor the tasks. Resource containers are controlled by node managers and assign the system resources. So they will contain the resources. Containers will contain the resources. So next is the Hadoop ecosystem. So as the big data increased and the tools also increased, the evaluation, the usage also increased, the more and more tools got added up to Hadoop and it formed a ecosystem. So let us see what is this Hadoop ecosystem. Hadoop is highly scalable and can work with large volumes of data. Hence, it plays a big role in collection, storage and processing in IoT data. As we know, IoT networks also produce huge amount of data. Hence, Hadoop plays a big role in collection, storage and processing of the IoT data. It also provides the complementary software packages to add additional functionality to their distributed Hadoop clusters. So this Hadoop ecosystem provides complementary software packages to provide the additional functionalities. It is collectively called as Hadoop ecosystem. Hadoop now comprises more than 100 software projects under Hadoop umbrella. So under the name Hadoop, it is comprising of more than 100 software packages. They are capable of handling every element in the data lifecycle from collection, storage, processing, analysis and visualization. So all these software projects which are under this Hadoop ecosystem are capable of performing all these operations, that is collection, storage, processing, analysis and visualization. All these operations can be done using those tools which are available under Hadoop ecosystem. So here I have given a link to know more about the Hadoop ecosystem. So let us watch the video.
In this session, let us try to explore the Hadoop ecosystem. The success of Hadoop framework has led to the development of an array of softwares. Hadoop, along with these set of related softwares, makes up the Hadoop ecosystem. The main purpose of these softwares is to enhance the functionality and increase the efficiency of Hadoop framework. The Hadoop ecosystem comprises of Apache Pig, Apache HBase, Apache Hive, Apache Scoop, Apache Flume, and Apache Zookeeper, along with the Hadoop distributed file system and the MapReduce. We all know the functionality provided by the Hadoop distributed file system and the MapReduce framework. Now let us try to explore the functionality offered by rest of these softwares. Let us begin with Apache Pig. Apache Pig is a scripting language used to write data analysis programs for large data sets that are present within the Hadoop cluster. This scripting language is called as Pig Latin. Apache HBase is a column-oriented database that allows reading and writing of data onto the HDFS on a real-time basis. Apache Hive is a SQL-like language which allows querying of data from HDFS. The SQL version of Hive is called as HiveQL. Apache Scoop is an application that is used to transfer data to and from Hadoop to any relational database management system. Apache Flume is an application that allows to move streaming data into the Hadoop cluster. A good example for streaming data would be the data that is being written to the log files. And finally, the Zookeeper takes care of all the coordination that is required among these softwares to function properly. This concludes our discussion on the topic Hadoop ecosystem.
So those are the different tools available in Hadoop ecosystem, but not only limited to that, there are several other tools also available under Hadoop ecosystem. So one such is Apache Kafka. So let us see about this Apache Kafka. It is the real-time events generated by smart objects are consumed into a processing engine. Messaging systems are designed to accept data or messages from sensors or log files and deliver it to stream processing engines such as Spark, Streaming or Storm. So these tools are used for logging. So Apache Kafka is a distributed publisher-subscriber messaging system that is built to be scalable and fast. It is composed of topics, message brokers, where producers write the data and consumers read the data from these topics. Okay, it is something like a broker where it performs publisher subscriber kind of model for exchanging of information. The publisher publishes the data and the subscriber takes the data. Due to distributed nature of Kafka, it can run in clustered configuration, can handle many producers and consumers simultaneously, so parallel processing can happen, and exchanges information between nodes which are parallelly connected, allowing topics to be distributed over multiple nodes. So information will be distributed among the multiple nodes. The goal of Kafka is to provide simple way to connect data sources and allow consumers to connect to that data in a way they would like. So this is the Apache Kafka data flow. So here is a producer, here is a consumer. So this is the Kafka cluster where message brokers are attached to topic and Kafka nodes are here. So as and when the messages are published, they will be consumed by the consumer. So consumers are like Spark, Storm, Hadoop, etc. To know more about this Kafka, let us watch a video.
Hi, so now we're going to talk about why Apache Kafka. So let's take a very simple example. At first, you have a source system and your target system. This could be your website and your database. It's very simple at first. But then it gets very complicated because you have many source systems. You have your website, you have your email clients, and then you have many target systems. You have many databases, you have many different data stores that you want to store your data to. And it becomes quite complicated because you have to integrate every source system data with every target system data. And each integration is tedious, they don't have their own protocols, it's not really safe, and so on. So Apache Kafka comes in the middle. It helps you decouple your data streams. Basically, as an example, on the top we have all sources, website events, pricing data, financial transactions, or user interactions. And they will all publish the data to Apache Kafka. And then your databases, your analytics, your email systems, your audits, they can just take the data from Kafka and do whatever they want with it. But the thing is, there's a middle layer, Apache Kafka, which allows you to decouple your data streams. For your website events, they only worry about pushing data to Apache Kafka, and that's it. And for your database, they can just source any data from any source, just from Apache Kafka. So that's a very, very strong concept in here. So Apache Kafka, on top of decoupling, does a little bit more things. It is distributed with a resilient architecture and fault tolerant. That's because you have many servers. There's also something called horizontal scalability. That words basically mean that you can add servers and your system will scale as you add servers. It's also really high performance. Some latency is observed to be less than 10 milliseconds, so it's pretty much real time. And it's used by many, many firms. It was first created by LinkedIn, then open sourced, and today it's used by the biggest firm, so Netflix, Airbnb, Yahoo, Walmart, and I can't name them all. So a few use cases for Apache Kafka. You could use it as a messaging system. You can use it as an activity tracking tool. You could use it to gather metrics from many different locations. You could gather application logs. We can also do stream processing using what we'll see is the Kafka Streams API or Spark, for example. As we saw before, it allows you to decouple your systems. And it has many different integrations, and I just named a few. There's Spark, Flink, Storm, Hadoop, and other big data technologies. So Apache Kafka really solves big problems, and it's a really, really cool technology to know. It's up and coming nowadays, and many companies are already using it, so it's good that you learn that skill.
Okay, that is how the Apache Kafka works. Now let us see Apache Spark. Apache Spark is an in-memory distributed data analytics platform. It is a distributed data analytics platform. It is designed to accelerate processes in the Hadoop ecosystem, which enables it to run jobs quickly because it is having in-memory. At each stage of MapReduce operation, the data is read and written back to the disk. It introduces little latency for each disk operation, reading the data and writing back to the memory. However, with Spark, the processing of this data moved into high-speed memory. It uses high-speed memory, so latency will be less. This speeds the batch processing jobs and also allows near real-time processing of events. Real-time processing is done by a component of Apache Spark project called Spark Streaming. Spark Streaming is an extension of Spark core responsible for taking live stream data from messaging system like Kafka. It takes the live stream data from Kafka, systems like Kafka, and dividing it into smaller micro batches. These micro batches are called discretized streams, or in short D streams. So these micro batches are called D streams. The Spark processing engine is able to operate on these smaller pieces of data, allowing subsequent actions. Due to this instant feedback, the capability of Spark is becoming an important component in many IoT deployments. Systems that control safety and security of personal time-sensitive processes in manufacturing, space, infrastructure control, in traffic management, all benefit from these real-time streaming capabilities. So basically it is a streaming, it gives streaming functionality. So this is the architecture of Spark. Spark can work standalone with only HDFS, or it can be accompanied by Yarn or MapReduce. So in different combinations the Spark can work. To know more about the Spark, let us watch a video.
Apache Spark is a fast and general engine for large-scale data processing. It is around 100 times faster than MapReduce using only RAM and around 10 times faster if using disk. It builds upon similar paradigms as MapReduce. It is well integrated with Hadoop as it can run on top of Yarn and can access HDFS. A cluster resource manager or resource manager is a software component which manages various resources such as memory, disk, CPU of machines connected in the cluster. Apache Spark can run on top of many cluster resource managers such as Yarn, Amazon EC2 or Mesos. If you don't have any resource manager yet, you can still use Apache Spark in standalone mode. Instead of building own file or data storages, Apache Spark made it possible to read from all kinds of third-party data sources, such as Hadoop Distributed File System, HBase, Hive, Tachyon, and Cassandra, and many more. Apache Spark comes with great set of libraries. First, data frames. Data frames provide a generic way to represent the data in tabular structure. The data frames make it possible to query data using R or SQL instead of writing tons of code. Streaming library makes it possible to process fast incoming streams of used data using Spark. MLlib is a very rich machine learning library. It provides very sophisticated algorithms which run in distributed fashion. GraphX makes it very simple to represent huge data as a graph. It provides library of algorithms to process graphs using many computers. Spark and its libraries can be used with Scala, Java, Python, R, and SQL. Only exception is GraphX, which can only be used with Scala and Java. With these set of libraries, it is possible to do ETL, machine learning, real-time data processing, and graph processing on big data using Apache Spark. We will cover each component in details as we go forward.
Okay, that is all about Apache Spark. So let us study about the other tools of Hadoop ecosystem, Apache Storm and Apache Flink. Apache Spark is often used for both the distributed streaming analytics and batch processing. So the Spark is used for both distributed streaming and batch processing. Apache Storm and Apache Flink are Hadoop ecosystem projects. They are designed for distributed stream processing mainly, and they are commonly deployed for IoT use cases. They can pull data from Kafka, which we have seen earlier, and process it in near real-time fashion. It will pull the data from Kafka and process it in real-time fashion. Storm is very fast. A benchmark clocked it at over 1 million pulses processed per second. per node. It is scalable, fault tolerant, and also guarantees your data will be processed. It guarantees that your data will be processed, and it is easy to set up and operate. So that is about the Apache Storm and Apache Flink. Okay, so let us study the remaining things in the next class. So that's all for today. Have a good day. Bye.